Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you guys all join us this morning. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes and wait for a few more people to attend, and then we will get started. For those of you who have just joined, we're just going to give people a couple more minutes and then we're going to get started. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us here at Function Point. Some of you may know me. My name is Jess Bird, and I have been with Function Point for, oh gosh, now about 7 years. And today's focus is to talk about the work planning view and other ways to elevate your agency's efficiency. This is myself, obviously Jess, in my younger years. We're not going to put up a recent picture there. And then this is my colleague, Gil Daniels, who's also joining us on the webinar. He will be the one that's going to answer all of your lovely questions that come in as we go through the different parts of the presentation. I do encourage you to ask questions, and then what Gil's going to help me do is if there's the same type of question coming in from multiple people, he'll let me know that so I can make sure that I'm addressing that during the presentation.
Hello.
If there's any, hi Gil. You want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Gil. I'm a customer success manager here at Function Point, working with Jess. I haven't been here as long, and that is a younger picture of me as well.
Let's hold on to our youth while we can. All right. So what we're going to look at today is the work planning view, how we're managing our schedules and tasks using the work planning view. I'm just a minute here. We're going to launch a poll because I'm kind of interested to see how much interest people have in this. I want to also take a minute to look at the Kanban view. It's surprising how many people haven't actually looked at it, or when they do, they're not really comfortable in using it. So I want to take a moment to talk about that as well. I've built a couple of reports that we're going to look at as well that will kind of take the information that's being put into this work planning view and summarizing it into data that we can use to make changes in terms of how we are project managing or just in our staff utilization in general. And then I'm also going to go through and show you some new work planning view enhancements. So before we get into that, we're just going to launch a poll. Gil, if you could kindly do that for me. Again, really just to kind of get your feedback in terms of, what people are excited to see. Excellent. Excellent. All right, well, I'm glad to see that there's nobody on this call that doesn't really need to see it. So that being said, I am going to, we can go ahead, I think, and close the poll, Gil, sorry. And now I'm just going to jump right in and I'm going to start showing you guys in terms of things from a setup perspective, things that could impact things on the work planning view. First and foremost, for people who, need to know a little bit more about it, let's start by looking at this one here. Now, this is the work planning view in its current state. And at the end of the call, I'm actually going to show you these work planning view enhancements that we've got coming out. Those should be released by April 1st. We do have some great customers that have also been signed up to do some testing for us. So before it goes live, we want to make sure that everybody's going to be comfortable with it. So when we look at the work planning view, what we're trying to identify first and foremost is that, oh, sorry, was there a question, Gil? I feel like
Yeah, your
somebody,
screen's not showing, Jess.
oh, okay, hold on.
There we go.
Perfect, okay. Thank you for pointing that out. So when we come to the work planning view, the whole goal is to kind of see in terms of all of our resources where they're allocated. We want to identify potential situations like this one where we're looking at Beth and we can see, okay, well, she has an overdue task where nothing has been tracked in terms of the actual. So what is that saying to us? Did Beth completely forget that this was assigned to her? Or was this something that maybe as a project manager, she wasn't actually going to need to do after all, and we should have closed out? So we want to take a look at things like that, overdue tasks, to make sure that if that's the type of situation, we can easily click into that task, edit the start date and due date. If it's really just maybe this task or this job in its entirety is moved out, maybe it's that we shouldn't have assigned it to Beth in the first place. So we want to make sure we go and then adjust it to the person who it should have been assigned to. And I'm going to extend that due date as well, just so we can see how it moves off Beth's plate. And we're going to save that. It's no longer showing under Beth. And when we go down to Ding Ding, now he has that production task. It's still overdue, but now it's assigned to Ding Ding to take responsibility for. Okay. Any questions coming in, Gil?
Not yet.
Okay, perfect. Let's talk a little bit about what these hours represent. So this 8 here, this is saying to us that out of an 8-hour day, how much of their time do we expect them to work on billable work? Let's take into consideration that very rarely is any staff members full day billable work. There's internal meetings that they have to attend to, admin work, anything like that. But we really want to be able to task as much of their time as billable as possible. So when we look at Beth, for example, right now this is saying she has 10 hours between the next 4 days that she's available, because this represents her not being available. She's either away on vacation or just out of the office. So now this is saying, based on the number of hours we've allocated in this task, estimated 7 hours, she's actually already tracked 7, sorry, estimated 4, she's actually already tracked 7. But because of all the other tasks that she has to do where she hasn't tracked any time, 16 hours estimated, this is due on March 21st. So in order to get that done in the time she has left, it's bumping her up to she has 10 hours of billable work to do in the day. Okay. Now, when we look at somebody, this is a little more what we'd like to see, anywhere between 6 and 7 in terms of billable allocation. So when we're again looking at this, we're now making the determination. We can have a chat with Beth and say, hey, did you just forget to track your time on this? Are you actually further ahead than what is being represented in the work planning view? Or do you need more time? Like what's happening here? Some agencies have that kind of one-to-one dialogue with that individual. Other people have the ability from a very high level to kind of holistically look at things and be able to make those decisions and where they can move those people around. So I would encourage those of you who maybe don't have like a solid practice to reach out to one of us at Function Point, because that's something we can definitely assist with. Some customers are using things like pinned notes for resource requests. So if I'm like an account manager and I'm saying, okay, I potentially am going to need Jenny. Oh, great. Jenny's like super booked for the next little while. How am I going to then be able to pull her into the job that I need her for? People are using pinned notes to somebody who's more of a project manager and saying, hey, is there any way you can shuffle some of Jenny's other work around so I can take her on for this project? So again, this is really kind of your big one-stop shop for looking to see who's available. Looking at this, we can see that Ross is only working for, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. He doesn't work Thursdays and Fridays. So I have to be very conscious when I'm assigning work to him that it's going to fall on one of the days that he's available. The other thing we want to point out in here is the filtering capabilities. So we can filter by things like job, we can filter by company, by project, for those of you that are using more retainer-based or campaign type setups in your system. Also by role. There's a lot of agencies nowadays that are using roles, and obviously, like you can see in our example here, creative team all being lumped together. So when you're looking specifically for a creative resource, you know where to go. Other times people are using roles as services as well. And what we see sometimes is people creating roles for maybe things that are kind of out of the box that we want to maybe assign somebody to, or to just be able to assign a task to that we can then pick up and reassign to one of the other individuals or other roles. So there's multiple ways of using that. Obviously, priority coming in is relevant. This little legend here again is kind of referring back to those numbers. The first number here is kind of like, how much is available when they're fully allocated, meaning that they get to that 6 out of 8. It's going to show up in that kind of peachy color. When they're over allocated, which you can see with both Beth and Jenny, it's going to show up in red. Staff vacations or whatever it is, any staff out of offices are always going to show with these gray lines. And what it's going to do is it's going to take into consideration, if we look at this design task, 16 hours between March 1st and March 21st. It's going to then take the fact that she doesn't have any hours actuals in there, that it's going to say, okay, well, you've only got X amount of time left, so this is how many hours per day you're going to have to work on this task in order to complete it by March 21st. Any questions coming in, Gil?
Yeah, I have one from Jamile. She's saying, let's say a person has 8 hours a day, but only
Mhm.
has 50% billable hours. Will it show their capacity as 8 or 4 in the work planning view?
It'll still show it as 8, but what we would do in that case is we'd make sure that we're adjusting at the staff level their billable percentage amount. So when you look at staff rates and permissions, if I go into Beth, for example, I'm saying her billable hours percentage is 82%. So if somebody's really only billable 50% of the time, then that's what you would want to make their billable hours target percentage as. So then when you pull your reports, you can say, out of all of Beth's um, availability, yes, 50% of her time went to that billable work. Does that answer your question?
Yep, she says yes.
Perfect.
Jess, also, some of the people want to know how you access the work planning view, if you can show that.
Oh, certainly. So when you hover over this task module at the top, you just go straight down to the bottom to work planning view. And if you're not able to see that, that is a permission-based thing. So if any of you on the call aren't able to see that and this is something that you want access to, speak to whoever your administrator is or whoever kind of has that admin capabilities within Function Point within your organization, and they can probably turn that on for you. The other thing I'll point out to you, just kind of in relation to that last question, is sometimes people will actually change this number. So they will say, I only want to show them having 7 hours available during the day because I know 1 hour is going to be non-billable. So I don't even want to factor that in. And you can make those adjustments within the system setup as well. So under admin and under the work calendar, you can say that the number of working hours per day, you could change that to 7. I've seen some people change it to 9. Don't know how happy their staff is. But then you can also carry that over to staff. And then the other situation is let's say Bobby, for example, like Ross's situation, we can see that for Bobby, he only works on Mondays. He doesn't work Tuesdays. Thursdays, he only works half a day. So that's also telling us that that's how much billable time we can assign to him in a day. Okay. For those of you who are not familiar with the work calendar, this is also where you would go in to enter any staff holidays, which then grays them out from the work calendar. And you can also put in any office closures. So things like, when a lot of agencies tend to close between Christmas and New Year's. So if that's the case for you guys, then it's great to be able to see that represented in the work planning view for any kind of future planning you may be doing. Any
Just
other
add another
questions on
question.
that? Sure, yeah.
Yeah. Shaban is asking, can multiple people be assigned to a task? If so, how do you break down the hours per person?
Great question. So currently we have a feature called a shared task. Now I'm going to be very transparent. It is a great feature. However, there are a couple caveats to using shared tasks. So when you're in a schedule, and I can just show you if we go to add a task, when you go and you select the task type, if you check off shared task, when you come to the assign to, you can pick multiple people. What happens though is you're not able to say, oops, Jenny, what I'm not able to do is say Beth gets 2 hours, Ian gets 4 hours, and Jenny gets 5. I basically have to take the total number of hours that would be allocated to that task in its entirety and just figure out how much that would work out per person, right? So I would have something like 2 hours per staff, which would give me 6 hours total. Okay, so that's one caveat. The second one is that let's say Beth finishes her work first and she's like, okay, I'm done with this. When she sets that status to complete, it's also going to close it for Ian and Jenny. So this is something that for kind of future knowledge, we are working on a complete project management revitalization, shall we say, and things like shared tasks are going to have better functionality. So if that is something you're interested, by all means, use it in its current state. I just want to point out the caveats to that. What we recommend to those people that want to use shared tasks is that when one person's done, when you change that status to complete, you pass it to the other person in line so that they know, okay, you completed your part. Now this task is on me. Did that answer your
Just how is
question?
that? Yeah, and how will that be represented in the work planning view, that shared task?
Yeah, it would just like each individual, which that task would show under each individual's section. It would just be, I'd be identified as shared task. Like you can see this one here, right where it says review, it's shared. And you can see that it's assigned to Jenny and Talia as well. Yeah, good. Okay.
Perfect. Yep.
Um, again, from an editing perspective, if you do need to make adjustments, you can simply click into that, change the dates, change the estimated number of hours. Again, if you're somebody that's, how should I delicately phrase this? Uh, Forced to manage the work planning view for those individuals who are not very good at completing their tasks. I think that was good. Then you can by all means go in and then update these for them. So no harm, no foul. Okay, the other thing you can do too is you can also extend this date. So if you're like, well, I've got an estimate coming into play and I need to see what people have got down the pipe. And unfortunately, these guys are just set up for this specific call, but you'd be able to see anything for those like long-term tasks. A lot of people who have retainers will have like one project management task that starts on January 1st and ends on December 31st, right? So you'll want to see that represented throughout the entirety. Okay.
Jess, I have
Yes,
one question if you don't mind. I have someone asking, who do you recommend has access to see the work planning view?
great question. So first and foremost, any kind of administrative level, but definitely those people that are involved in the project management. So some agencies where the account executives, the account leads, they are basically determining upfront the resources they want based on the requirements of the client, right? Now, if that's your approach, then they should have insight in the visibility into this so that they can proactively look at who's available and maybe make decisions on essentially who they're going to pull into their estimate. And that's imperative too when you're using things like staff rates or role rates, where the individual that you pick could alter the value of that estimate. So definitely people in that type of role, project managers, of course. But I also don't think it's necessarily bad for some end users to be able to look at this in its entirety and see what's everybody's kind of working on. Now, I do hear a lot of comments around, well, I don't want people to see what other people are working on, things like that. But if your agency's a little more open and that's not an issue, then I think then it's still great for people to be able to kind of look at this and say, oh yeah, nuts, I've got this overdue task. I should go and do something with that.
One more question, Jess.
Sure.
Is there a way to change a timeline task to a shared task?
No. Once it's in that status, you have to kind of maintain that. And that is something that is definitely part of that project management revitalization that I'm calling it, is to be able to do that. We get a lot of requests for that where you start out thinking it's just going to be one individual working on it, but then you recognize that, oh, great, we need to pull 3 or 4 people into that now. So that is definitely something that's on our roadmap.
Okay. And for tasks that span multiple dates, are the estimated hours divided evenly across the dates, or can we determine how the time is applied to each individual date?
That's great. So currently, in its current state, they divide those hours equally across the dates. But what I'm going to show you at the end of the call with the enhancements, you have the opportunity to either front load or allocate evenly across the task. So we'll get to that later. Let's save that for the pops and popcorn. It'll be really exciting. Okay, now what I want to do is show you some of the reports that we've built. And I've got a couple in here that are specifically related to staff utilization. So this is a resource and actuals report. Go back to the bar graph. There we go. So what I'm looking at here is my staff, and I'm looking at their forecasted work hours, and I'm looking at their actual work hours. So for somebody like Alberto, I'm saying I've got, or sorry, for Beth, I've got 33.85 hours forecasted for her within this date range, right? So that's from March 1st to March 14th. So that's the number of hours I have forecasted for her to work. Right now, she's tracked 7 of those hours, right? So Beth needs to kind of get busted in her butt because I had that date range till the 14th, right? So this is kind of a nice way to see how people are kind of tracking. You know, Jenny's got 62.47 hours allocated, or sorry, forecasted, and she's tracked 14. So this is just one type of example. You can, you know, obviously pull different types of data into here, but it gives you a really kind of nice visual in terms of how people are tracking against the work that we've assigned. The other one I'm going to show you all, one staff utilization. And what this is it's showing our target utilization, the utilization, and the capacity-based utilization. So what we're trying to gather here is what's their average utilization. So that's 82%. And you remember earlier when we went back to that staff record and I was showing you where you could adjust that amount of utilization percentage, that's what's pulling in this number here. And what this is saying is that she's 100% utilized right now based on what we've assigned to her, but out of what she's tracked, 9% of that is going to billable time. So capacity-based utilization is saying out of the capacity that individual has, how much of that time has been tracked towards billable work. And some of you are tracking non-billable time in the system as well. So you could also be able to have a line that would show billable versus non-billable. Because that's going to, another thing that people like to look at, it's like if we've got Johnny, senior designer, working on a bunch of internal stuff when his bill out value is 220 bucks, how much is that costing us as an agency to have him do this internal stuff when we should be having him on, you know, customer facing work? All right. Any questions on the reports? And if you don't have Premium BI, I should comment on that. If you're like, how do I get to this? First and foremost, you have to have the Premium BI in order to be able to build these graphs. You also have the option to put things into pivot tables. There's line graphs you can create. You also have the ability to save these reports. So this is something that, this is a report I want to use all the time, but now I want to come in and I'm going to adjust my data, or I'm going to adjust my date range. I can still do different filtering over here. But I also have the ability to then share with other members of my team. So if anybody on the call does not have Premium BI and they're interested in learning more about it, by all means reach out to your CSM. If you don't know them, then you can easily contact our support team as well. Okay. One other thing I want to show you that's kind of in conjunction with the work planning view is the Kanban board. So a lot of people will come down to the tasks and to-dos. And sorry, before I move off of that, Gil, was there any reporting related questions?
In the work calendar, instead of filtering by role, can we filter by group as one?
In the work calendar or the work planning view?
They said work calendar. I'm wondering if they mean the work planning view.
I think the work planning view, yes, you can filter by role as well. So if you're just looking at all the web developers, it'll
Yeah, they're
just,
asking about the group, um, uh, like a role group, a group role. You know how
so
there's
the groups,
another.
no, it's the groups don't pull into this, but the roles do. So if you've got groups assigned to people, we can't filter the work planning view by group, but we can by role. Okay. Okay, in the essence of time, I just want to jump into the tasks and to-dos here. Now, a lot of people will run this report as project managers. They'll select certain staff. They just want to see maybe what's going on in the creative team. So they're going to pick these individuals, and then we can see just the tasks assigned to those. We can track, due dates, things that are overdue, when they're over in the actuals in comparison to the estimated, and then this, variance percentage. One other thing I'll point out that some people comment they don't recognize is, let's say, for example, this person tracked 1 hour, but they're like, that's all I needed. They could change that to 100%, right? And then change that to closed. So if anybody is looking at these percentages from a data perspective, keep that in mind. But the other thing you can do is, if you're like, this is kind of old school UI, if for those young folks on the call, they tend to like something a little more visually um, impressive. So a lot of people like to come to the Kanban board. Now, this is my first recommendation is, you look at the work planning view, you see what is assigned to everybody. You want to start making some changes, you can either go directly from there, or you can come into the Kanban board. This is also more geared to those people that are really just logging into the system to track time. And what this does is gives them the ability to say, okay, well, I don't want to see the draft. I don't want to see what's canceled or confirmed. I just want to see what's been assigned to me, what I'm working on, and we want to keep the completed column in there. So when we drag this over, we can just close it out easily. Is there anybody on the call that's maybe never seen, I would not really have a poll for this, but like that's never really seen it, as I don't want to spend too much time on that, but I will just point out a few things. The ability to change between task status and due date. And again, you can filter the columns you see here. So if you're like, I don't care about unspecified or due more than 3 weeks out, I just want to see what's overdue, due today, due this week, and due next week. You have that ability. You can also filter by company, by campaigns, for projects, jobs, job statuses, roles, and then you can also filter by assignee. So if you're somebody who's managing a team and these are all your team members, you can come in and then you can save as my team, and you can either share that filter so other people can see it, or you can just save that for yourself. And then you can come in and look at the drop downs, my team, and only see what's assigned to them.
Just one
Okay.
more time, can you show how to get to the Kanban board there?
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing I'll point out too, is if you're like, you come down to the tasks and to-dos panel and you're like, this is gross, I never want to look at this, then the first thing you do is change this to board from that display. And then you can actually make this your default page by go to view setting and then going down to task status, so that the next time you go and click on tasks and to-dos, it takes you directly to the Kanban board. All right.
Can you customize the columns in the Kanban view, Jess?
You can customize them, but only in terms of what you can see. Like you can display if you want it. If you're somebody who's like looking at it from a project management perspective, you might want to look at these draft things and be like, oh yeah, those are ready to be assigned. I can just move those over. But that's in terms of the names or the structure. No, but you can definitely show what's being displayed. Okay. Okay, so before I move on to the other enhancements, and I know this was kind of high level overview, but I really do think that for those of you who are already kind of familiar with the work planning view, the enhancements are going to be more exciting. So if you just give me one moment here and let me know if there's any other questions coming in, Gil.
So far, we're good.
Okay. Anybody, people can drum roll on their desk if they want. Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, so it looks like we're in the exact same place, but now when we go to the work planning view, ta-da! Look at this, all this new stuff. So let me point out a couple of these things. This is an estimate. So now what the work planning view is going to be able to show you is that you're estimating. Now, caveat here again is if we look at this specific estimate, we have to make sure that we're allocating staff at the service level, okay? Because what that does is it's basically saying, so for again, for those of us, when we're in the estimate building stages, if we know or we have an idea of who we'd like to resource for that specific service, we would be adding those into the estimate. And so what that does is it's going to feed Beth and the start date and end date, as well as Ian and Katrina, into this work planning view to show us that we potentially need these guys based on these estimates. Okay. Thoughts, feelings, everybody excited? The other thing that's changed in here, so just keep in mind too that what's going to happen is if this estimate goes past kind of like the due date, then it's going to drop off, right? So if the customer hasn't approved it, you'd have to go back and make sure you adjust those dates within service that are allocated to those individuals to reflect the new estimate dates, because after those dates pass, they're just going to drop off this work planning view. Okay, so that is something that we would want to discuss, a process between the account leads or the account executives that are building these estimates with the project management people. Question? I see someone's hand up.
Yeah, Jill was asking earlier, what does pinned mean when you were referring to that?
Oh, pinned notes. I'll show you that just towards the end of the call, but essentially it means that I can generate a note in the system and then there's a list on the side and I can click on a box and just say, I only need this to go to Bob or Sue or Fred to see this. So pinning it, and there's different permissions and alerts that go along with pin notes as well. There's definitely, just for those of you who don't know, before I finish in there, so for some reason it's not letting me in, but when you click on this question mark here, it'll take you directly to all of our resource materials, and I actually think that they're pretty darn good. So by all means, if there's information that you're looking for, reach out to your CSM and we can direct you there, or feel free to navigate there yourself. Okay, so a couple other things. We've got more filters. So now, whoever was asking about the groups, I didn't want to like blow it and not be able to show you here. So now you can filter by staff group. So if you do an agency that does kind of like, people have different roles, but the roles are maybe very specific, like digital analyst versus strategist, but they all roll up into this creative bucket, excuse me, then you can be able to filter by the staff role. Couple other cool filters that we've introduced is job billing status. So for those of you that do have non-billable jobs in the system that people get assigned tasks to, we can just filter that out to only show our billable jobs. Which other one is new here? Work bar type. So we can look and see, okay, I only want to see tasks that are in draft, right? Refresh my screen, I don't have any. So now I only want to see the ones that are assigned and in progress. Look how clean it looks now. I take that out and refresh. We're back to our standard. Excellent. Staff and priority. This is another thing. Question, Gil?
Nope, there's that staff group that one of the members asked about. It's there in that enhancement filter.
Yeah, staff group. Yeah. The other thing now is you can see that we've got this estimated is showing now in our kind of legend here. But in terms of the calculations, so allocate equally is going to do what it has always done. It's going to take those hours and distribute them across each day. If I want to front load my hours, then what it's going to do is it's going to say, I'm going to try to get you to get this done like as soon as possible, right? And then this day you can spend an hour on this task, and then this day you can spend 6 hours, right? I want to free you up these other 2 days, right? So if we look at this one, it's saying, okay, you don't have to do anything with this one until then. And then you got to spend an hour and a half. This one, you're okay until these 2 days. So it's basically trying to get you to get the work done as soon as you can. So thoughts, questions, feedback? I'm really interested to see, like, you know, specifically I thought it was very interesting when we released this to show the estimated hours as well for those people that are kind of allocating staff at that level. So yeah, I think this is going to be wonderful, and especially with all the new filters. And like I said, we do have an internal team, pardon me, as well as an external team that are working on testing. So there might be even some additional changes. Some comments have been things like when we hover over the task, we just see the name of the task, like sketching and roughs, where a lot of people would like to be able to see the company name in front of that. Because when you think about it, if that's primarily Beth's job, she might have 12 sketching and rough tasks on her work planning view. But in terms of, from her perspective, obviously priorities factor into this as well. Now that you can filter in by priorities, you have low, normal, high, and urgent. But let's say in the back end, and I'll just show you how to access this. Under list maintenance, you come down to priority list. So now they have an alias. So I could have like an urgent one, but it's just normal, which doesn't really make sense. I would put that as high. But based on where this is in the list, if this goes, sorry, if this high is above this in the list, then it doesn't matter if I put this as urgent, this one's going to take priority. So you want to think about that when you're building out that they're in the order that you want them to appear. And then that will feed in to the new work planning view.
One question here, Jess.
Sure.
When an employee is out of office and it is indicated in work planning view, does Function Point have the capability of knowing when that employee should not have a task assigned due on those days?
Great question. So if you're saying if I tried to assign a task to Ross on this day, I could still do it. But what the task would do, it would just take the hours and put it into his availability. So it's not intuitive enough to say, for a pop-up to say, you can't assign a task to Ross on this day because he's not available. But that is something, if anybody's ever done this before, also underneath this, there's an area to submit an idea. So anytime you're working through Function Point, if you feel like there's a missing feature or that there's a feature that you think could be enhanced to be even better, by all means, please go in there and submit that request. That is what dictates us coming up with changes to things like the work planning view, right? It's all the feedback from those of you using it on a day-to-day basis. So I really do encourage you to, submit those ideas. And if there's anybody on the phones like, I've submitted 18,000 ideas and you guys have never done them, let me put that into a bit of perspective. Everything is evaluated and everything is looked at in a very granularly and say how much of one thing is being requested by multiple people, right? Because ultimately, when we implement something like this, it's impacting everybody that uses the system. So we really do have to be considerate in terms of the types of changes we make to the product. But by all means, I don't want to discourage you from submitting any of these ideas because, again, this is a lot of what dictates our roadmap.
Perfect. Another question here. Do you have any recommendations on how to get started? It looks to be a large undertaking, but very necessary.
Great question. So first and foremost, you have to be using tasks. The work planning view has really no value to you if you're not using tasks. If you're daunted by the thought of using tasks, a lot of people are saying, oh, it's hard enough for me to get them to track their time, let alone, start introducing tasks. Reach out to your CSM. And again, if you don't know who that is, just message our support team and they will put you in touch with us. But let's have a conversation about that because it's easy for us to kind of give you a ton of recommendations, but without really knowing how your agency works specifically and what the user adoption would be like, it's kind of difficult to say. So by all means, reach out to us with any kinds of questions you have on that, and we'd happily set up calls with you to work through that. I will say that for anybody out there whose agency is kind of struggling with staff resources. Like one person's always complaining that they're overworked, where this guy over here is playing video games 3 times a day. You know, if that's the kind of thing you're struggling with, or really just being able to see if you're putting the right people on the right jobs, then, you know, let's definitely have a conversation about that. Any other questions coming in?
Let's see. How do the priorities look on the board view, and can we filter by client?
Yes, you can. 1 second. You can filter by company. And then the priorities, let me see if I have any priorities in this one. So let me just add them in there. So what that's going to do is it's going to move this task kind of to the first of my list. Now, one thing that we did talk about on a call yesterday is that what it won't do if we adjust that here is it's not going to push that up if you're one of those individuals tracking times in the tasks and to-dos panel, but that is something that we recognize and that we're looking into. So we're going to have like some information on basically all the enhancements that we're going to be able to put out there on the website for everybody. I would encourage you to get in there once it's live. Start playing around with it. If you've got any questions or you need assistance with your CSM, by all means, reach out to us and let us know. What we're going to do is launch one more poll. And Gil, if you could do that now.
Here we go.
Great. A lot of the answers coming in, people want to learn more about it, so that's perfect. Like I said, if you don't know who your CSM is, and haven't had a chance to look at the attendee list for a while, but if anybody out there, I can see Ashley. I know you, Ashley. Who else is on there? Ellie, I know Ellie. So if you guys want any more, Katie, you know, our old friends, Kelsey, Pam, any of you guys, and sorry, I'm just calling out individuals that I know, Winston. If you guys want to set up any time directly with me to kind of review this together once it's gone live, by all means, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I'm happy to set up some time. Peter, you should like this. Yeah. Any other questions coming in? We will stay on the line for a couple more minutes in case, you know, there are other questions trickling in, but I hope that you found this useful. Again, it's really kind of hard to condense into 45 minutes, like all of the wonderful things you can do from a staff resourcing perspective. But check out the resource materials underneath our help documentation. Get in there and submit ideas. Peter, who's on the call, is an old pro at that. So get in there and submit ideas. We do read them, we do value them, and we do our best to kind of implement what we can. So I hope that you guys found this helpful. And like I said, reach out to us with any questions you have. Thanks so much and have a great day.
Thank you.